The Montblanc pen felt heavy in my hand, cold as the smile of the man sitting across from me. He slid the papers over the marble table, demanding I sign away my $2.5 million penthouse. I glanced at his mistress filing her nails on my sofa. Then I signed. He laughed, thinking he had won, unaware that in 12 hours his lawyer would call in a panic, screaming that he had just signed his own death warrant. My name is Joan Whitby, and if there is one thing my career as a senior appraiser of high-end antiquities has taught me, it is that the most convincing forgeries are always the ones that shine the brightest. Real gold has a softness to it, a malleability that speaks of age and wear. Real diamonds have inclusions, tiny birthmarks of carbon that prove they were forged in the crushing dark of the earth. But Gavin? Gavin was a cubic zirconia in a Tiffany setting. He was flawless, loud, and ultimately worth absolutely nothing. I sat perfectly still in the high-backed velvet armchair, my hands resting on my lap, fingers interlaced to hide the slight tremor that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with adrenaline. The living room of our penthouse on the 34th floor overlooked Lake Michigan, the dark water churning below like a bruise spreading across the city. This apartment, with its floor-to-ceiling windows and Italian marble floors, had been my sanctuary. Now, it felt like a surgical theater, sterile and cold, where my life was being dissected. Gavin Mercer paced in front of me. He was wearing the cashmere sweater I had bought him for his last birthday, the sleeves pushed up to reveal a Patek Philippe watch that he had charged to my black card under the guise of business expenses. He looked handsome, in that aggressive, manufactured way that played so well on social media. His jaw was set, his eyes bright with the manic energy of a man who thinks he is closing the deal of a lifetime. "Just sign the papers, Joan," he said, his voice dropping to that reasonable, patronizing register he used when he wanted to gaslight me. "We can do this the hard way, or we can do this the easy way. The hard way involves lawyers, depositions, and me dragging your precious family name through the mud until you are selling these curtains just to pay court fees. The easy way? You sign the transfer agreement, you walk away with your dignity, and we call it a clean break." I looked down at the document on the coffee table. It was a masterpiece of legal theft. It ceded the penthouse, the furniture, and most agonizingly, the contents of the wall safe to him. In exchange, I would be absolved of the debt he had accrued, debt that technically, legally, belonged to the business entities he had set up in my name. It was extortion wrapped in a silk ribbon. "You are asking for everything, Gavin," I said softly. My voice sounded foreign to my own ears, small and defeated. It was the voice he wanted to hear. "The apartment, the heirlooms, that is my history. It is just stuff, Joan," he snapped, throwing his hands up. "Material possessions. You always say you value experiences over things. Well, experience this. Freedom. I am offering you an out. My lawyer says I could take you for spousal support. I could take half your future earnings, but I am a nice guy. I am generous." I shifted my gaze past him to the sprawling beige sofa where Kylie Vance sat. She was 24 years old, though she filtered her photos to look 19. She was scrolling through her phone, occasionally looking up to examine her manicure with an air of bored detachment, as if she were waiting for an Uber rather than witnessing the destruction of a marriage. She was beautiful, certainly, in a sharp, modern way. But what held my attention was not her face. It was the necklace resting against her collarbone. It was a sapphire pendant, deep blue, surrounded by a halo of old mine-cut diamonds set in oxidized silver. My grandmother's necklace, the one she had worn to her own wedding in 1942, the one I kept in the safe, wrapped in velvet, only to be taken out for cleaning. Seeing it on Kylie, hanging casually over a polyester crop top, felt like a physical blow to the chest. It was a violation so intimate, it made my stomach turn. Kylie caught me staring. She reached up, twirling the sapphire between her thumb and forefinger, a smirk playing on her lips. "It is a little heavy," she said. her voice grating and nasal. And the setting is kind of antique, don't you think? Gavin said we could have the stone reset, something more modern, maybe rose gold. Gavin turned to her, his expression softening instantly into a performance of adoration. Whatever you want, babe. Once the ink is dry, it is all yours. I looked back at Gavin. He believed he had won. He believed that the woman sitting before him, the woman who had paid his debts, funded his failed startups, and introduced him to Chicago society, was broken. He saw my silence as submission. He saw my stillness as shock. He did not know that I was counting. 1, 2, 3. I was counting the seconds, calculating the timing. I was an appraiser. My job was to look at an object, determine its provenance, assess its condition, and predict its market value. I had spent the last month appraising Gavin Mercer, and I had determined that he was a liability I needed to liquidate immediately. If I sign, I said, keeping my eyes on the paperwork. You promise to leave me alone? No more emails, no more calls to my partners at the firm. It ends today. Gavin leaned over the table, placing both hands on the marble. He smelled of expensive scotch and my own betrayal. You have my word. Joan, I just want what is fair. I built this lifestyle as much as you did. I managed the renovations. I handled the staffing. This is my sweat equity. It took every ounce of self-control I possessed not to laugh in his face. He had managed nothing but his own ego. But I needed him to feel powerful. I needed him to feel like the conqueror. Okay, I whispered. I reached for the Montblanc pen lying next to the papers. It was heavy, black resin with gold trim. I had given it to him when he signed his first contract, a contract that later turned out to be a pyramid scheme. Wait, Gavin said. He pulled his phone out of his pocket. Do it for the record. I do not want you coming back in 6 months claiming I coerced you. He held the phone up, the camera lens a black, unblinking eye. Go ahead. Joan, say you are signing this of your own free will. I looked directly into the lens. I imagined the jury that might one day see this footage. I imagined the judge. I needed to look pathetic. I needed to look like a woman backed into a corner, stripped of her fight. I let my shoulders slump. I let a sheen of tears coat my eyes, easy enough to summon when I thought about the sapphire around Kylie's neck. I am signing this of my own free will, I said, my voice trembling just enough. I am giving Gavin Mercer the penthouse and the contents of the safe in exchange for a dissolution of our marriage. And, Gavin prodded, zooming in, and I understand the terms. I finished. I lowered the pen to the paper. The nib scratched against the surface. A harsh, definitive sound in the quiet room. Joan Whitby. I signed my name with a flourish, the ink glistening wet and black. It was done. Gavin snatched the papers away the second I lifted the pen. He checked the signature, a wide grin splitting his face. He stopped recording. There, he said, exhaling as if he had been the one under pressure. That was not so hard, was it? You are making the right choice. Joan, you will see. You need a fresh start, something smaller, more manageable. Kylie stood up, walking over to him and draping her arms around his neck. The sapphire swung, hitting the buttons of his shirt. Can we celebrate now? You promised we could open that bottle of Dom once the hag was gone. She did not whisper. She did not care if I heard. To them, I was already a ghost haunting their new home. I need 20 minutes to pack my things, I said. Standing up, my legs felt steady, stronger than they had when I sat down. Keep it brief, Gavin said, distracted, already kissing Kylie's neck. Anything you leave behind becomes mine at midnight. Read the fine print. I turned and walked toward the master bedroom for the last time. The hallway was lined with art I had collected over a decade. Early 20th century sketches, a limited edition print by a Japanese master, a small oil painting of the Chicago skyline from the 1930s. I did not look at them. I did not need to. Inside the bedroom, I pulled my small leather weekender bag from the back of the closet. I did not pack the designer gowns Gavin had insisted I buy to fit his image. I did not pack the furs. I did not pack the jewelry box on the vanity. I packed 2 changes of functional clothes. I packed my passport. I packed the hard drive I had hidden inside the hollowed-out heel of a winter boot. And I packed the small, velvet-bound book that contained the inventory codes for every single item in the house. I moved with the efficiency of a soldier breaking camp. I stripped the bed of the silk sheets I had bought in Milan, folding them neatly. Not to take them, but simply to leave the mattress bare. A small act of erasure. I wanted the room to look dead. I walked into the walk-in closet. My reflection in the mirrored doors showed a woman in a beige trench coat, hair pulled back in a severe bun. I looked nothing like the socialite wife Gavin wanted. I looked like who I really was, a professional. I hesitated for a moment by the shoe rack. A pair of Manolo Blahniks sat there, untouched. Gavin had bought them for me after he crashed my car, an apology in the form of satin and leather. I picked one up. It was light, flimsy. I dropped it into the trash bin in the corner. When I walked back out into the living room, Gavin and Kylie were already popping the cork on a bottle of champagne. My champagne. A vintage I had been saving for my 10th anniversary. The pop echoed like a gunshot. Gavin looked up, a flute in his hand. He scanned my small bag, his eyebrows raising in mock sympathy. "That is it? That is all you are taking? You know, Joan, you could take the coffee maker. I am not a monster." "I have everything I need," I said. My voice was no longer trembling. It was flat, hard, and cold. I walked to the door, my heels clicking on the marble. I paused with my hand on the brass handle. The weight of the moment settled on me. This was the threshold. Once I stepped over it, the trap would snap shut, but not on me. I turned back to look at them. Kylie was nestled in the corner of the sofa, sipping the wine, one hand idly playing with the sapphire necklace. Gavin was standing by the window, surveying the city as if he owned it. "Gavin," I said. He turned, annoyed that I was still there. "What?" "Take care of the apartment," I said. I let my eyes drift to Kylie, then back to him. "And the collection. Keep it safe. It is heavier than you think." Gavin laughed, a barking, dismissive sound. "Do not worry about us, Joan. We can handle the weight. Just make sure you do not starve out there in the real world." "Goodbye, Gavin," I said. I opened the door and stepped out into the corridor. I closed the door behind me, the latch clicking with a finality that felt like a guillotine blade dropping. I walked to the elevator bank. The hallway was silent, the plush carpet swallowing the sound of my footsteps. I pressed the call button. The arrow lit up, a glowing red triangle pointing down. I waited. The adrenaline that had sustained me during the confrontation began to curdle into something colder, sharper. I checked my watch. It was 8:15 in the evening. The elevator doors slid open with a soft chime. I stepped inside the mirrored box. As the doors began to close, narrowing the slice of the hallway until it disappeared completely, the mask I had been wearing for the last year finally slipped. The camouflaged wife vanished. The victim evaporated. I looked at myself in the bronze-tinted mirror of the elevator wall. My eyes were dry. My pulse was steady. A small, terrifying smile touched the corners of my lips. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a burner phone. A cheap, prepaid device I had bought with cash 3 weeks ago. I typed a single message to a number saved only as ET. "The fish has taken the bait." I pressed send. I watched the floor numbers count down on the display. 33, 32, 31. With every floor that passed, I was getting further away from the life I had built. And closer to the moment Gavin Mercer would realize that he had not just signed a divorce settlement, he had signed a confession. He thought he had stripped me of my assets. He did not understand that an asset is only valuable if it is authentic. And what I had left him in that penthouse, locked in that safe and hanging around his mistress's neck, was the greatest masterpiece of deception I had ever created. The elevator hit the lobby level with a smooth deceleration. The doors opened. I stepped out into the cool air of the lobby, nodding to the doorman who looked at me with confusion. noting my lack of luggage. "Calling a cab. Mrs. Mercer?" he asked. "No, Henry," I said, buttoning my coat. "And it is Ms. Whitby. It always was." I pushed through the revolving doors and into the Chicago night. The wind off the lake was biting, but it felt clean. I took a deep breath. Tasting the exhaust and the ice, the game had officially begun. Gavin had 12 hours until the banks opened, 12 hours to celebrate, 12 hours to feel like a king, and then the check would come due. Hindsight is a cruel lens. When you look through a loop at a diamond, you are searching for flaws, for carbon spots, for feathers that might compromise the structural integrity of the stone. You are trained to be critical. You are trained to be suspicious. But when you look at a man across a crowded room, especially when you are 29 years old and quietly desperate to be seen, you do not use a loop. You use a filter of rose-colored glass that blurs the edges and turns every warning sign into a charming quirk. It began 5 years ago at the annual Vanguard Antiquities Gala. The event was held in the grand ballroom of the Palmer House Hilton, a space dripping with gold leaf and frescoed ceilings that smelled of old money and lilies. I was the head of the organizing committee, which meant I had spent the last 6 months worrying about seating charts and dietary restrictions, and I was currently hiding behind a display of Ming Dynasty vases, trying to massage a cramp out of my foot. That was when Gavin Mercer walked in. He did not just enter a room. He announced himself to it without saying a word. He was wearing a tuxedo that fit him with the kind of precision that usually costs 3 months of rent, though I would later learn he had rented it from a high-end service. He had the sort of face that belonged on a billboard advertising cologne or investment banking, square-jawed, blue-eyed, with hair that fell in a perfectly calculated wave over his forehead. He spotted me hiding behind the porcelain. Instead of walking past, he grabbed 2 flutes of champagne from a passing waiter and slid into my sanctuary. "I do not know who Ming is," he whispered, a conspiratorial grin lighting up his face, "but he is doing a great job of blocking that boring senator from seeing you." I laughed. It was a startled, genuine sound that cut through the polite murmur of the room. "That is the Emperor," I said, taking the glass he offered. "And thank you. If I had to listen to one more story about legislative tax breaks, I was going to shatter something priceless." "I am Gavin," he said, extending a hand. His grip was firm, warm, and dry. "I am here to save you from tax law." "Joan," I replied. "And what do you do?" "Gavin, when you are not rescuing damsels from politicians?" He leaned against a pillar, sipping his drink. "I am the CEO of a startup called Ecosphere. We are developing blockchain solutions for sustainable energy grids. Basically, I am trying to save the planet while making sure people can still charge their iPhones." It sounded impressive. It sounded noble. It was a word salad of buzzwords that meant absolutely nothing. But to me, a woman whose life revolved around dusty objects and dead history. He sounded like the future. We talked for 2 hours straight. He asked me about my work with an intensity that made me feel like the most fascinating person in the room. He listened. He made eye contact. He laughed at my dry jokes. By the end of the night, he had my number. By the end of the week, he had my heart. The timing could not have been more perfect for him or more disastrous for me. 2 months into our whirlwind courtship, my grandmother passed away. She was the woman who raised me, the matriarch who had taught me how to distinguish a ruby from a spinel, the only family I had left. I was shattered. I felt unmoored, drifting in a sea of grief so deep I thought I would drown. And there was Gavin, my anchor. He was everywhere. He coordinated the funeral arrangements when I was too despondent to speak. He fielded calls from distant relatives who only wanted to know about the will. He sat with me in the dark living room of my grandmother's house, holding my hand while I cried until my throat was raw. "I have got you. Joan," he would whisper, kissing my forehead. "You are not alone. You have me. We are a team now." I clung to him, I did not see a predator isolating his prey. I saw a knight protecting his queen. I was so grateful for his presence that I stopped looking at the details. I stopped being an appraiser. The first red flag came 3 months later. On my 30th birthday, Gavin insisted on taking me to Alinea, one of the most expensive restaurants in Chicago. It was a theatrical dining experience. Course after course of edible art. He looked dashing, ordering a bottle of wine that cost more than my first car. "To us," he toasted, his eyes locking with mine. "To the empire we are going to build." It was magical until the bill came. The waiter placed the black leather folder on the table. Gavin reached for his blazer pocket, patted his chest, then checked his pants. A frown creased his forehead. He checked the other pocket. The frown deepened into a look of bewildered panic. "That is strange," he muttered. "I could have sworn." He pulled out his phone, tapping furiously. "Damn it. My bank just sent me a security alert. They froze my accounts because of that wire transfer from Singapore I authorized this morning. It is for the new solar project. They must have flagged it as suspicious activity." He looked up at me, his face a mask of humiliation. "Joan, I am so sorry. This is embarrassing. I have to call them. But it is going to take an hour to clear up. Do you mind?" "Of course not," I said quickly. Reaching for my purse, I felt a surge of protectiveness. He was a big-shot CEO dealing with international finance. Of course these things happened. "Do not worry about it. It is my birthday treat." I handed the waiter my platinum Amex. The bill was nearly $4,000. "I will Venmo you the second it clears," Gavin promised, looking downtrodden. "I wanted to treat you like a princess tonight." "You did," I assured him. "It is just money, Gavin." He never paid me back. He never mentioned it again, and I, not wanting to bruise his ego or make the transaction feel transactional, never asked. It happened again a month later. We were at a charity auction for the Art Institute. Gavin bid $5,000 on a sculpture. When it came time to settle up, his card had a chip malfunction. The card reader just would not take it. He made a big show of rubbing the chip, blowing on it, acting frustrated. I stepped in and wrote a check from my personal account to save face in front of my colleagues. "Technical glitches," he said, shaking his head as we walked to the car. "Technology is great until it fails you, right?" I nodded. Swallowing the tiny seed of doubt that had begun to germinate in my stomach, I told myself I was being petty. He was wealthy. He was just disorganized. He was a visionary, not an accountant. The second red flag was sharper, more specific. It was his obsession with the inheritance. After the funeral, the estate was settled. I inherited the penthouse, the investment portfolio, and the crown jewel of our family history, grandmother's collection of raw, uncut gemstones. These were not polished trinkets. These were geological marvels, sapphires from Kashmir, emeralds from Colombia, rubies from Burma. They were kept in a heavy steel safe in the study, along with the family heirlooms. One evening, about 6 months into our relationship, I found Gavin in the study. The safe was open. I had given him the combination the week before, a gesture of trust that I felt was necessary to prove I was letting him in completely. He was holding a rough diamond, a massive, cloudy stone the size of a walnut. He was holding it up to the light, squinting. "It is heavy," he said, not hearing me enter. "It is 40 carats, I said from the doorway. He jumped, nearly dropping the stone. He spun around, a guilty flush rising on his neck, which he quickly covered with a smile. "Joan, you scared me. I was just admiring. Your grandmother had an incredible eye." He placed the diamond back on its velvet tray with a reverence that felt slightly too greedy. "So, these are just sitting here? Doing nothing?" "They are appreciating," I corrected him. "They are a hedge against inflation, and they are beautiful." Right, Gavin said, walking over to me and wrapping his arms around my waist. "But imagine what we could do with the capital if we liquidated just a few of them. I mean, Ecosphere is about to launch a Series B funding round. If we invested, the return could be 10 times the value of these rocks. I pulled back slightly. These aren't just rocks. Gavin, they are my heritage. I am not selling them. He held up his hands in surrender. Okay, I get it. Sentimental value. I respect that. I am just thinking about our future. That is all. I want to give you the world. Joan. He dropped the subject. But I noticed from then on, whenever he walked past the study, his eyes would drift toward the safe. He asked questions about insurance policies. He asked about the security system. He asked if I had an up-to-date appraisal. He framed it as concern for my safety, but it felt like an inventory check. Then came the proposal. It happened 8 months after we met. He rented a private boat on Lake Michigan. There were fireworks, literally. There was a fireworks display happening at Navy Pier that he claimed he had timed perfectly, though I suspect it was just a happy coincidence. He got down on one knee. The ring was a diamond solitaire. It was beautiful. I would later find out he had bought it on a payment plan that he defaulted on 3 months later, leading to debt collectors calling my phone because he had listed me as a reference. But in that moment, under the exploding lights, I said yes. I wanted to be loved. I wanted to be a wife. The wedding planning was a blur. Gavin wanted it fast. Why wait? He argued. We know what we want. Let us get married in the fall. 10 months after we met, we were 2 weeks away from the ceremony. I was sitting in my office at Vanguard when my family lawyer, a dry, cynical man named Mr. Henderson, called me. Joan, he said, his voice grave. We need to discuss a prenuptial agreement. You have significant assets, Mr. Mercer's financial history is opaque. His company, Ecosphere, does not seem to have any filed patents or revenue streams that I can verify. I brought it up to Gavin that night over dinner. I tried to be casual. Mr. Henderson sent over some standard paperwork, just a prenup. It is routine for someone in my position. It just keeps what is mine, mine, and what is yours, yours. Gavin stopped eating. He put his fork down slowly. He looked at me with eyes that were suddenly swimming with tears. It was a masterclass in emotional manipulation. A prenup? He choked out. Joan, do you think I am after your money? No, of course not, I stammered. It is just protection, for both of us. Protection from what? His voice rose, cracking with hurt. From us failing? Is that how you go into this marriage? With one foot out the door? I am giving you my life, Joan. I am giving you my name. And you are talking to me about dividing assets before we even say, I do? He stood up, pacing the room. I thought we were different. I thought we had trust, absolute trust. If you need a piece of paper to feel safe with me, then maybe we should not get married. He grabbed his keys and stormed out. He stayed at a hotel that night. I spent the entire night crying, terrified that I had ruined the best thing that had ever happened to me because of my cynicism. I called him 20 times. He did not answer. When he finally came back the next morning, looking disheveled and broken, I was the one who apologized. I tore up the draft of the prenup in front of him. I am sorry, I told him. I trust you. I do not need a contract to love you. Gavin hugged me, burying his face in my neck to hide a smile I could not see. That is all I wanted to hear. Baby, just us, against the world. We were married 2 weeks later in a lavish ceremony at the Botanical Gardens. I paid for 80% of it because Gavin's liquidity was temporarily tied up in the merger. I wore my grandmother's sapphire necklace. Gavin wore a bespoke tuxedo. We looked like the perfect couple. That night, in the master bedroom of the penthouse that was now our marital home, I lay awake watching him sleep. The moonlight filtered in through the sheer curtains, illuminating his face. He looked peaceful. He looked innocent. I reached out and lightly touched his cheek, feeling a surge of overwhelming love. I thought I had found my safe harbor. I thought I had found the partner who would stand by me through decades of auctions and appraisals and quiet Sunday mornings. I did not know that I was lying next to a man who had already Googled how to override a wall-safe digital lock. I did not know that the merger he talked about was a fabrication. I did not know that the only thing he loved in that room was the deed to the apartment sitting in the nightstand drawer. I closed my eyes and drifted off to sleep. Feeling lucky, I was the expert who could spot a fake from across the room. But that night, I held the counterfeit close to my heart and called it real. I had invited the parasite in, and he had already begun to feed. They say the first year of marriage is the hardest, but that is usually because you are learning how to share a bathroom or whose turn it is to empty the dishwasher. For me, the first year was a master class in the art of boiling a frog. The temperature of the water rose so slowly, degree by agonizing degree, that I did not realize I was being cooked alive until my skin was already blistering. The shift from romantic partner to venture capitalist happened almost immediately after the honeymoon. Gavin's company, Ecosphere, morphed overnight. The sustainable energy rhetoric vanished, replaced by a feverish obsession with the volatile world of cryptocurrency and decentralized finance. He told me he was pivoting. He said he had found a gap in the market that the big banks were too slow to exploit. He spoke with the conviction of a prophet, his eyes wide and shining. Pacing our living room as he outlined a future where we would be billionaires. He just needed a little seed money. "It is a bridge loan. Joan," he told me one Tuesday evening, massaging my shoulders as I sat at the dining table reviewing auction catalogs. "Just until the Series A funding comes through, I need to show the investors I have skin in the game. $50,000. That is nothing to us. That is a drop in the bucket compared to what this will yield." I hesitated. $50,000 was not nothing. It was a significant chunk of liquid cash. But he was my husband. His success was my success. Right? That is what the marriage vows implied. I wrote the check. I told myself I was being a supportive wife. I told myself I was investing in our future. 2 weeks later, the money was gone. It did not yield. It did not multiply. It evaporated into a rug pull, a scam token that launched, hyped, and then vanished along with the developers and the capital. Gavin came home that night looking like a man who had seen a ghost. He collapsed onto the rug in the foyer, weeping. Great. Heaving sobs that shook his entire body. He buried his face in his hands, crying about how stupid he was, how he had let me down, how he was a failure who did not deserve me. "I just wanted to give you everything," he wailed, clutching at the hem of my skirt like a drowning child. "I wanted to buy you an island. I am so sorry. Joan, I am so sorry." My heart broke for him. I saw his pain, not his incompetence. I knelt down and held him, stroking his hair, shushing him. "It is okay," I whispered. "It is only money. We can make more money. Please, Gavin, do not cry." I forgave him. I absorbed the loss of $50,000 as if it were a spilled glass of milk. I comforted the arsonist who had just set fire to my savings account, but the fire did not go out. It just changed fuel sources. While Gavin was restructuring his business strategy, which seemed to involve sleeping until 11 in the morning and spending his afternoons at the Soho House networking, my career at Vanguard Antiquities was soaring. I was promoted to Senior Director of Appraisals. My salary increased by 20%. I was bringing in substantial commissions from high-profile estate sales. On paper, we were wealthy. In reality, I was bleeding cash. Gavin decided that in order to be a successful businessman, he had to look like one. It was the logic of a con artist. Dress for the job you want, even if the job is stealing from your wife. I came home one evening to find a brand new Range Rover parked in our deeded spot in the garage. It was matte black with custom rims. Gavin was leaning against it, grinning. "Surprise!" he shouted. "Whose car is this?" I asked, my stomach dropping. "Ours," he beamed. "Well, mostly mine for client meetings. You cannot pick up an angel investor in a 5-year-old sedan. Joan, it sends the wrong message. It smells of desperation. This," he slapped the hood, "smells of success." "Gavin," I said, my voice tight. How did you pay for this? I leased it under the business, he said breezily. The business has no income, I pointed out. I used your credit info as a guarantor, he said, the smile never faltering. Since we are married, our credit is linked anyway. It is just a formality. Do not worry. Babe, the payments are nothing. Once the new platform launches in Q3, I will pay the lease off in full. He did not pay it off. The monthly payments of $1,200 came out of our joint account, the account into which only I deposited money. Then came the clothes, bespoke suits from Savile Row tailors who flew into Chicago for fittings, handmade Italian loafers, watches that cost more than my first year of college tuition. He called it branding. He said he was building the Gavin Mercer persona. Every time I tried to bring up a budget, he would sigh, rolling his eyes as if I were a nagging mother scolding a child for buying candy. You have a scarcity mindset, Joan, he would say, adjusting his silk tie in the mirror. You think small. That is why you work for a salary. I think big. That is why I am an entrepreneur. You need to trust the process. To ensure I did not have anyone to validate my growing anxiety, Gavin began the systematic isolation. It was subtle at first. A comment here, a look there. Why do you hang out with Sarah? He asked one night after we came home from a dinner party. Did you hear how she spoke to me? She was so condescending. She asked me 3 times if my company had a website yet. She thinks I'm a joke. Joan, it really hurts my feelings that you let your friends disrespect your husband like that. She did not mean it that way, I argued. She is just practical. She is jealous, he corrected. She is jealous that you have a young, hot husband who has big dreams. While she is stuck with that boring accountant, they all are. They want us to fail. Joan, misery loves company. We do not need that negative energy. Slowly. I stopped accepting invitations. I canceled brunch dates. I skipped the monthly wine nights. I told myself I was prioritizing my marriage. I told myself I was protecting Gavin's feelings. In truth, I was building the walls of my own prison. But the breaking point, the first real crack in the foundation, came 8 months into the marriage. Gavin had been moody for weeks. He was spending hours on the phone, speaking in hushed tones, hanging up whenever I entered the room. Finally, he sat me down in the living room, pouring me a glass of wine with a heavy hand. I have an opportunity, he said. A massive one, a leverage buyout of a competitor, but I need collateral for the business loan. The banks are being sticky about the lack of revenue history. I swirled the wine, watching the red liquid coat the glass. What kind of collateral? Real estate, he said. He paused, watching my face. The Penthouse. I froze. The Penthouse was not marital property. I had bought it with my inheritance 3 years before I met him. It was my safety net. It was the one thing my father had made me promise never to risk. No, I said. It was the first time I had given him a flat refusal. Just listen, Gavin said, leaning forward, his intensity spiking. I do not need to sell it. I just need to be added to the deed. If my name is on the title, I can list it as an asset on my balance sheet. It boosts my solvency ratio. The bank approves the loan. I buy the competitor. And within 6 months, we refinance and take my name off. It is just paper. Joan. It is a signature. It is my home, I said quietly. It is the only thing I own free and clear. I cannot risk it. Gavin, if you default... Default? He stood up so abruptly the coffee table shook. You think I am going to default? That is what you think of me? I bust my ass every day trying to build something for us. And you think I'm going to lose your precious house? It is high risk, I tried to reason. You said so yourself. You do not trust me. He spat. The accusation hit me like physical spit. That is what this is. You think you are better than me because you inherited money and I have to work for mine. You treat me like a gigolo. Joan. Like I am just here to look pretty and drive you around. You do not respect me as a partner. That is not true, I cried, standing up to meet him. Then prove it, he screamed. "Put my name on the deed. If we are one flesh, if we are partners, then what is yours is mine. Unless you're planning to leave me? Is that it? Are you keeping a go-bag ready?" The fight lasted for 3 days. He slept in the guest room. He refused to eat the food I cooked. He walked past me in the hallway as if I were invisible. The silence in the apartment was suffocating. I felt like a monster. I felt like a stingy, unsupportive shrew who was emasculating her husband with her financial caution. I wanted the Cold War to end. I wanted my charming, loving Gavin back. But my instinct, the appraiser's instinct that knew the difference between value and cost, would not let me sign over the deed. It was a line I could not cross. So, I offered a compromise, a fatal, foolish compromise. On the 4th night, I knocked on the guest room door. He was lying on the bed, staring at the ceiling, looking tragic. "I am not signing over the house, Gavin," I said softly. He did not move. "Get out." "But," I continued, stepping into the room, "I know you need to feel involved. I know you feel like I'm locking you out of my life." I walked over to the bed and sat on the edge. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a heavy brass key and a slip of paper with a 6-digit code written on it. "This is the key to the wall safe," I said, "and the combination." Gavin sat up slowly. He looked at the key, then at me. "The safe?" "The collection is in there," I said. "The unpolished gemstones, the sapphires, the rubies, grandmother's jewelry. It is worth millions. Gavin, I want you to have access. I want you to be able to look at them, to understand the history. Maybe you can find inspiration there. Maybe knowing that we have that reserve will make you feel more secure about the business." It was a peace offering. It was an intimacy I had never shared with anyone. Giving someone the combination to a safe is a greater act of trust than sharing a bed. Gavin took the key. His fingers closed over the cold metal. The anger vanished from his face, replaced by a look I interpreted as gratitude, but which I now recognize as calculation. "You would do that for me?" he asked softly. "I want us to work," I said, tears pricking my eyes. "I love you." He pulled me into a hug, squeezing me tight, over his shoulder. I stared at the blank wall, feeling a wave of relief that the fight was over. I did not see his face. I did not see the way his eyes darted toward the master bedroom, where the safe was hidden behind a painting. "Thank you, Joan," he whispered into my ear. "I just want to look, just to get inspired. I promise." I believed him. I believed that by giving him access to the treasure, I was saving the marriage. I did not realize I had just handed the fox the key to the henhouse and told him to make himself comfortable. I did not realize that while I was fighting to keep the roof over our heads, he was already figuring out how to strip the copper wiring from the walls. It was 1 month before the day I signed the divorce papers, and the silence in the penthouse was absolute, save for the rhythmic, metallic heartbeat of a 19th-century Breguet carriage clock I was restoring on the dining room table. I have always found comfort in the mechanics of time. Gears do not lie. Springs release tension at a predictable rate. If a clock stops working, there is always a logical reason. A stripped pinion, a dried-out bearing, a misalignment of the escapement. Human relationships are rarely so diagnostic. But that Tuesday evening, I was about to find the loose screw that would bring the entire machinery of my marriage crashing down. Gavin was out. He had told me he was at a networking mixer for Ecosphere, trying to court a potential angel investor from Silicon Valley. I was alone, wearing cotton gloves, carefully reassembling the brass housing of the clock. My mind was calm, focused on the task. The trouble began with something domestic, something entirely mundane. I decided to take a break and throw a load of laundry into the machine. I walked into the master bedroom, where Gavin had dumped his suit jacket from the previous day on the floor, a careless habit he had developed recently. Treating our home less like a sanctuary and more like a hotel room, he was trashing. I picked up the navy blazer. It was wool, structured, and heavy. As I folded it to take it to the dry cleaner pile, I felt the crinkle of paper in the inside breast pocket. Assuming it was a business card or a reminder note, I reached in and pulled it out. It was a receipt. 2 receipts, actually, stapled together. I smoothed the thermal paper out on the dresser. The first one was from the Peninsula Chicago, one of the most expensive hotels in the city, located less than 2 miles from our apartment. It was dated 3 days prior, on a Tuesday afternoon when Gavin had claimed he was at a strategy meeting in the suburbs. The charge was for a day-use suite and room service, champagne, oysters, and a club sandwich. Total cost, $850. I stared at the number. $850 for a strategy meeting? My heart began to hammer a strange, uneven rhythm against my ribs. I looked at the second receipt. It was from the Cartier boutique on Michigan Avenue. Date, the same day. 2 hours before the hotel check-in. Item, Juste un Clou bracelet, rose gold. Price, $3,200. I looked down at my own wrist. It was bare. My birthday was 4 months away. Our anniversary had passed 2 months ago, a date he had forgotten because of work stress. A wave of nausea rolled over me, hot and acidic. Denial is a powerful drug, and I had been overdosing on it for months. But this was a bucket of ice water. There was no business expense that justified a rose gold bracelet. There was no networking that required a hotel room in our own city. I put the receipts back in his pocket exactly as I had found them. I did not want him to know I knew, not yet. My hands were shaking so badly I had to grip the edge of the dresser to steady myself. I needed to think. I needed to appraise the situation. Then, a darker, colder thought struck me. If he was spending this kind of money we supposedly did not have, money that forced him to beg me for loans, where was it coming from? I remembered the safe. I remembered the day I gave him the key and the combination, the day I tried to buy his love with my trust. I walked out of the bedroom and down the hall to the study. The door was open. The room was dark. I flipped the switch, the overhead light flooding the space. I moved the painting of the foggy seascape that concealed the wall safe. My fingers trembled as I keyed in the code, 482190. The lock beeped, a cheerful, electronic chirp that sounded mockery in the quiet room. I turned the handle and pulled the heavy steel door open. At first glance, everything looked normal. The velvet trays were stacked neatly. The leather boxes containing the antique jewelry were aligned. I pulled out the tray that held the raw gemstones, my grandmother's legacy, the retirement fund I had promised never to touch. They were there, the cashmere sapphire, the size of a pigeon's egg, the Burmese ruby, dark and bloody, the Colombian emeralds. They glittered under the overhead light, throwing fractured rainbows across the room. I let out a breath I did not know I was holding. He did not take them. I thought, he is a cheater. Yes, a liar. Yes, but he is not a thief. But then, I frowned. I picked up the sapphire. It was heavy. It was cold. But as I turned it in my fingers, something felt wrong. It was a subtle thing, a sensation that only someone who had handled thousands of stones over 20 years would notice. It felt too smooth, too glassy. I carried the stone over to my desk, where I kept my professional equipment. I switched on my high-intensity gemological lamp and pulled my 10-power loop from the drawer. I brought the stone up to my eye, focusing the lens. A real cashmere sapphire is never perfect. It has what we call silk, microscopic rutile needles that scatter light and give the stone its legendary velvety blue softness. It is the chaos of nature trapped in crystal. I looked into the heart of the stone Gavin had left in the safe. It was clean, perfectly, impossibly clean. There were no inclusions, no silk, no growth lines, and the refraction was single, not double. I dropped the loop. It clattered onto the desk. It was a synthetic, a flame fusion corundum, a lab-grown piece of blue glass worth, perhaps, $50 at a novelty shop. I grabbed the ruby, fake, flux-grown synthetic. I grabbed the emeralds, fake, hydrothermal quartz dyed green. I went through the entire tray. my breathing becoming shallow and ragged. Every single major stone, a collection valued at over $1.5 million, had been swapped. He had not just stolen them, he had replaced them with high-quality theatrical props. He had evidently spent months doing this, probably taking 1 or 2 stones at a time to a shady jeweler to have them replicated, then selling the originals and putting the fakes back to keep me pacified. I sank into the leather office chair, the room spinning. This was not just a betrayal of marriage. This was a felony. This was grand larceny. This was the systematic dismantling of my life, executed by the man who slept beside me every night. I did not scream. I did not throw the fake stones at the wall. A strange, icy calm settled over me, the same calm I felt when I was bidding on a high-stakes item at an auction. The time for emotion was over. The time for strategy had begun. I needed proof, irrefutable, court-admissible proof. The receipts were circumstantial. The fake stones were, he said, she said. He could claim I swapped them myself to frame him. I needed to catch him in the act. The next morning, I went to work as usual. I kissed Gavin goodbye, forcing a smile that felt like a mask of dried clay. "Have a great day, honey," I said. "I love you." "Love you too, babe," he said, checking his reflection in the hallway mirror. At lunch, I went to a specialty surveillance shop on the outskirts of the city. I paid cash for 3 micro cameras hidden inside functional smoke detectors and motion sensors. They were high definition, possessed night vision, and uploaded footage directly to a cloud server I could access from my phone. I installed them that afternoon while Gavin was out meeting clients. I placed one in the living room, one in the kitchen, and one, sickeningly, in the master bedroom. Then, I set the trap. "Gavin," I said that evening over dinner, "I have to go to Boston for 3 days. There is an estate sale of a recluse billionaire, and the firm needs me to authenticate a collection of Ming porcelain. I fly out tomorrow morning." Gavin's eyes lit up. He tried to hide it, rubbing his mouth with a napkin, but I saw the spark. "Oh, wow. That is sudden. But hey, duty calls, right? Do not worry about things here. I will hold down the fort." "I know you will," I said. I left the next morning with my suitcase. I took a cab to O'Hare Airport, waited 30 minutes, and then took another cab back to the city. I checked into a hotel 3 blocks from our apartment. I set up my laptop on the hotel desk, connected to the secure server, and waited. I did not have to wait long. At 7 o'clock that evening, the motion sensor in the living room pinged. I opened the video feed. The image was crisp, showing the wide expanse of our living room in 4K resolution. The front door opened. Gavin walked in. He was not alone. Walking beside him was a woman I had seen on his Instagram suggested friends list, but never met. Kylie Vance. She was tall, blonde, and moving with a terrifying familiarity. She threw her purse onto my entryway table and kicked off her heels, leaving them in the middle of the rug. "God, finally," she said. Her voice came through the microphone clear and sharp. "I thought she would never leave." "She is a workaholic," Gavin said. Laughing, he walked over to the bar cart, my bar cart, and poured 2 glasses of the 25-year-old scotch I had bought for my father's retirement gift. "She thinks this trip is going to get her a bonus. Little does she know she is funding our exit strategy." I watched, frozen, as they clinked glasses. They sat on the sofa. Gavin put his feet up on the marble coffee table, something I never allowed him to do. "So," Kylie said, taking a sip, "when is it happening? I am tired of living in that studio apartment." "Gavin, you said we would be in here by Christmas." "Patience, babe," Gavin said, reaching over to stroke her hair. "We are in the end game now. The business debt is all structured under her name. I just need her to sign the transfer on the Penthouse. I am working on it. I have got her convinced the company is in trouble and she needs to shield the asset by giving it to me." "She believes that?" Kylie laughed. A cruel, tinkling sound. "Is she stupid?" "She is not stupid," Gavin sneered. "She is just desperate. She is desperate to be loved. She thinks if she saves me, I will stay. It is pathetic, really, but it works for us. Once that deed is signed, I file for divorce. I kick her out. We sell the place, liquidate the rest of the assets, and we are gone. And the rocks? Kylie asked. The ones left in the safe are glass. Gavin chuckled. I sold the last real ruby last week to pay for your car. She has no idea. She never checks. She trusts me. I sat in the hotel room, staring at the screen. My hands were clenched so tight my fingernails were cutting into my palms. Hearing it was different than suspecting it. Hearing him call my love pathetic. Hearing him admit to the theft. Hearing the premeditation of my homelessness, it was a kind of violence. But the final blow was yet to come. Oh, I almost forgot, Gavin said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet pouch. I wanted to save this for your birthday, but why wait? He tossed the pouch to Kylie. She caught it, opening the drawstrings. She pulled out a necklace. It was the sapphire pendant, my grandmother's wedding necklace. The one piece I had thought was safe because it was too distinct, too identifiable to sell easily on the black market. He must have taken it from the safe that very morning, right after I left. Kylie held it up to the light. Wow, she said, but her tone was underwhelming. It is big. It is a natural, unheated sapphire, Gavin said, parroting the words I had taught him. Worth at least 80,000. Kylie draped it around her neck. She stood up and walked to the mirror in the hallway, the camera catching her profile perfectly. She posed, pouting her lips. It is a little vintage, she said, wrinkling her nose. Like old lady vintage. The setting is kind of chunky, but hey, blue is my color. She turned back to Gavin, grinning. If it is worth 80 grand, maybe we can just sell it? I saw this bracelet at Cartier that I really want. More modern. Whatever you want, baby, Gavin said, walking up behind her and wrapping his arms around her waist. Wear it for a bit. Flaunt it. It is yours now. The old hag doesn't even know it is gone. I closed the laptop. I sat in the silence of the hotel room. The tears I expected did not come. The grief I expected did not come. Instead, I felt a strange sense of liberation. The man I loved was dead. He had never existed. In his place was a target, a criminal, a man who had underestimated the woman he called pathetic. He thought I was desperate? He thought I was weak? I picked up my phone and dialed Elias Thorne's private number. It was 11 o'clock at night, but I knew he would be awake. Joan? His voice was rough with sleep. Is everything okay? No, Elias, I said, my voice steady and hard as the diamond I knew was fake. Nothing is okay, but it is about to be. I need to hire you, and I do not want to just divorce him. I want to bury him. Joan, what happened? I have video evidence of grand larceny, conspiracy to defraud, and adultery, I said. And I have a plan, but I need you to draft a very specific document, a Trojan horse. I am listening, Elias said, the sleep vanishing from his tone. I am going to let him win, I said, looking at the black screen of my laptop. I am going to let him think he has taken everything, and when he reaches for the crown, I am going to make sure it cuts his hands off. I hung up the phone. I walked to the window and looked out at the Chicago skyline. Somewhere out there, in my home, Gavin and Kylie were celebrating their victory. They were drinking my wine and wearing my history. Let them toast. I thought, let them get drunk on their own arrogance, because the hangover is going to be fatal. The first thing I did was not scream. I did not throw the hotel lamp against the wall. I did not call my mother in a fit of hysterical weeping. Instead, I went into a mode that I can only describe as cold storage. I became a machine. My heart rate slowed down. My breathing leveled out. I was no longer a wife discovering a betrayal. I was an archivist preserving evidence of a crime. I sat at the small desk in the hotel room and spent the next 3 hours triplicating the data. I downloaded every second of the footage from the cloud server, the conversation on the sofa, the theft of the necklace, the admission of the gem swapping, the conspiracy to defraud me of my home. I saved the files onto 3 separate, military-grade encrypted hard drives. One would go into a safety deposit box at a bank. Gavin did not know I used. One would go to my office safe at Vanguard Antiquities. The third would stay on my person, taped to the inside of my thigh if necessary. Data is fragile. It can be corrupted. It can be deleted. I was not taking any chances. By the time the sun rose over Lake Michigan, painting the water in deceptive shades of gold and pink, I had already formulated the skeleton of my counterattack. At 8 o'clock in the morning, I called the one person in Chicago who hated Gavin Mercer almost as much as I now did, Elias Thorne. We met at his office in the Loop an hour later. Elias was an old friend from my university days, a man who had traded his youthful idealism for Italian suits and a reputation as a shark in the murky waters of high-asset divorce law. He was sharp, cynical, and expensive. When I walked in, he took one look at my face, no makeup, dark circles, eyes like flint, and told his secretary to hold all his calls. I placed the hard drive on his mahogany desk and slid it across to him. "Watch the file marked Living Room Yesterday," I said. Elias watched in silence. He did not gasp. He did not shake his head. He just tapped his pen against his chin, his eyes narrowing as Gavin's voice filled the room, detailing his plan to leave me destitute. When the video ended, Elias closed his laptop and looked at me. "You know the law, Joan," he said, his voice devoid of pity, which was exactly what I needed. "Illinois is an equitable distribution state, but you have no prenuptial agreement. You commingled assets. You put money into his business. He has used your credit. He has access to the safe. If we go to court with a standard divorce petition, even with this video, it is going to be a bloodbath. He will argue that the gems were marital property. He will argue that the penthouse, while purchased by you, was maintained with marital effort. He could tie you up in litigation for 5 years and walk away with half just to make you go away." "I know," I said. "That is why we are not going to court. Not yet." Elias raised an eyebrow. "Go on." "I want to give him exactly what he wants," I said. "He wants the penthouse? He can have it. He wants the gems? He can have them. But I want to structure the transfer so that by the time he realizes what he actually owns, he will wish he was dead." Elias leaned back, a slow, predatory smile spreading across his face. "A Trojan horse." "Exactly," I said. "I need you to draft a settlement agreement. It needs to look like a capitulation. It needs to look like I am terrified, broken, and trying to salvage my company from ruin, but the devil needs to be in the details." We spent the next 6 hours wargaming the strategy. The first step was securing the real assets while making them look like liabilities. The penthouse was the biggest piece on the board. It was worth $2.5 million. If I just transferred it to a friend, a judge would claw it back as a fraudulent conveyance. It had to be legitimate. "The Phoenix Foundation," I said, remembering a dormant family trust my mother had set up years ago. My mother technically loaned me the money to buy the penthouse originally. The loan was never forgiven, just deferred, if the trust calls in the debt now. "We can transfer the title to the trust to satisfy the debt." Elias finished the thought, typing furiously. "We backdate the demand letter from the trust to last month, so it predates any divorce filing. We leave Gavin as a tenant or custodian on the deed if he insists on taking the property. We structure it so he gets the right of possession, but not the fee simple ownership, though the paperwork will be dense enough that a layman, or a bad lawyer, would miss the distinction. Effectively, he will be squatting in a house owned by your family trust, liable for all the taxes and upkeep, but unable to sell it. And the debt," I added. "I need him to believe I am drowning." This was the second prong of the attack. Gavin was a parasite. Parasites leave the host when the host begins to die. If he thought I was wealthy, he would fight for half. If he thought I was about to be indicted for fraud or bankrupt, he would run, taking whatever scraps he could carry. I pulled out my phone and called my chief financial officer at Vanguard. She was a woman of iron discretion. I told her to generate a series of internal memos and legal notices indicating that Vanguard was under federal investigation for import violations and that my personal assets were at risk of seizure. Make it look terrifying, I told her. I want to see words like asset freezing, indictment, and insolvency. Print them on official letterhead. Mark them confidential. I'm going to leave them where Gavin can find them. The third prong was knowing the enemy. I knew Gavin, but I did not know Kylie. I needed to know exactly who was wearing my grandmother's necklace. Elias had a private investigator on retainer, a man named Miller who looked like a retired linebacker and had the digital footprint of a ghost. By 4 o'clock that afternoon, Miller walked into the office with a thin manila folder. Kylie Vance, Miller said, tossing the folder onto the table. Real name Kylie Vanowski, 24 years old, from a small town in Florida. She is not a model. She does catalog work for budget clothing lines, but her real profession is hunting. I opened the file. It was a catalog of misery. Kylie had been engaged 3 times in the last 4 years. Each fiancé was older, wealthy, and married. Each relationship ended with a settlement or a payout to keep her quiet. But here is the kicker, Miller said, pointing to a mugshot stapled to the back page. It showed a younger, less polished Kylie looking sullenly at the camera. Petty theft and grand larceny in Tampa 2 years ago. She stole a Rolex from a boyfriend. Charges were dropped because he did not want his wife to find out. But the arrest record is there. She has a pattern. She likes shiny things, and she likes to take them when she leaves. Perfect, I said, staring at the mugshot. She is not just a mistress. She is a criminal accomplice with a history. That makes her the weak link. So, Elias said, clasping his hands, we have the bait. We have the trap. Now we need the contract. We drafted the document together. It was a masterpiece of legal obfuscation. We titled it, A Marital Settlement and Asset Separation Agreement. On the surface, it looked incredibly generous to Gavin. It stated that in exchange for a quick and amicable dissolution of marriage, Gavin Mercer would receive sole residency rights to the penthouse and ownership of all personal property currently contained within the wall safe. It looked like I was giving him everything he wanted. But then came the clauses, the deadly, boring paragraphs written in single-spaced, 8-point font that no one reads until it is too late. Clause 14. Section B. The transferee, Gavin, assumes full and total liability for any and all encumbrances, debts, liens, and tax obligations associated with the property, including but not limited to any retroactive assessments. Clause 16. Section A. The transferee acknowledges that they have had ample opportunity to inspect all personal property, the gems, and accepts them as is, waiving any future claims regarding value, authenticity, or provenance, and the coup de grâce buried in Appendix C. By signing this agreement, the transferee agrees to indemnify the transferor, Joan, against any third-party claims arising from the transferee's business activities. Acknowledging that said business activities were conducted solely for the transferee's benefit, in plain English, he was taking the house. But he was also taking the massive tax bill I knew was coming due on the building. He was taking the gems, but by accepting them as is, he could never sue me for fraud when he found out they were glass. And most importantly, he was signing a confession that his business debts were his alone, protecting my remaining cash from his creditors. It is a suicide note, Elias said, looking at the final draft with professional admiration. If he signs this, he is stripping himself of all legal protection, but he will only sign it if he thinks he is robbing you. He will sign it, I said, standing up and smoothing my skirt. He thinks I am weak, he thinks I am stupid, and he is greedy. Greed makes people blind. Elias, I took the draft. I put it in my bag. I felt a strange weightlessness. The sadness was gone. The betrayal was still there. A dull ache in my chest. but it had been cauterized by the heat of the plan. "One more thing," I said at the door. "When the time comes to execute the trust transfer, make sure the Phoenix Foundation creates a paper trail. I want him to receive a notification that the title has changed hands, but I want it to arrive exactly 24 hours after he signs this." Elias nodded. "The timing will be impeccable. Good luck, Joan." I walked out into the Chicago evening. The city was bustling, people rushing home to their families, to their dinners, to their lives. I was walking back to a war zone. I stopped at a pharmacy on the way home. I bought a bottle of cheap vodka and poured half of it down the sink in the bathroom. I gargled with a little bit of it, letting the smell settle on my breath. I mussed my hair. I rubbed my eyes until they were red and irritated. I needed to look like a woman on the edge of a breakdown. I needed to look like a woman who had been crying all day. A woman who was terrified of the future. I called a cab. "Take me to the Lakeshore Drive Penthouse," I told the driver, as the car moved through traffic. I checked the camera feed on my phone one last time. Gavin was alone in the apartment. Kylie must have left. He was sitting on the sofa, watching football, drinking a beer. He looked relaxed. He looked like the king of the castle. I put the phone away. "Enjoy the seat. Gavin," I thought, because the throne is rigged to explode. I arrived at the building, nodded to the doorman, and took the elevator up. My heart was pounding, not with fear, but with the anticipation of a performance. I had spent my life studying the authenticity of objects. Now, I had to manufacture the most convincing fake of my career, the defeat of Joan Whitby. I unlocked the door and stumbled in, letting the keys clatter to the floor. "Gavin?" I called out, my voice slurring slightly. "Gavin, are you home? I think I am in trouble." I heard the TV mute. I heard his footsteps approaching. The curtain was rising. The trap was set. All he had to do was step into it. The performance began the moment I crossed the threshold of the penthouse. I let my shoulders slump, curling my body inward as if I were trying to make myself smaller, a target too insignificant for the imaginary federal agents I was about to invent. I kicked off my heels, letting them thud carelessly against the baseboard, and leaned heavily against the wall, taking a shallow, ragged breath. "Gavin," I called out again, injecting a tremor into my voice that I did not have to fake. The adrenaline coursing through my veins was doing a fine job of mimicking hysteria. "Gavin, please tell me you are here." Gavin appeared from the living room. He was wearing his favorite loungewear, a silk robe that I had bought him for our first anniversary, holding a beer. His expression shifted from annoyance to calculated concern as he took in my disheveled appearance, the hair I had deliberately tangled, the mascara I had smudged, the scent of cheap vodka that I had gargled in the pharmacy bathroom. "Joan?" He set the beer down and walked over, his movements slow and predatory. "Babe, you look like a wreck. I thought you were in Boston. What happened? You smell like, have you been drinking?" I collapsed into his arms. It was the hardest thing I had ever done, pressing my face against the chest of the man who was planning to leave me homeless. I felt his muscles tense, not with comfort, but with the alertness of an animal sensing an opportunity. "It is a disaster. Gavin," I sobbed into his robe. "The deal in Boston was a setup. Federal agents were there. They raided the Vanguard offices this morning. They are saying it is money laundering, import violations. They froze the company accounts." I pulled back, looking up at him with wide, terrified eyes. "They are coming for me. Gavin, my CFO called me. She said they are going to seize personal assets to cover the fines. They are going to take the penthouse. They are going to take the collection. Everything." I saw the spark in his eyes. It was instantaneous. It was not fear for his wife. It was panic for his golden goose. He grabbed my shoulders, holding me at arm's length. "Wait, slow down," he said, his voice sharp. "What do you mean, seize assets? This apartment is in your name. Did they freeze your personal accounts yet?" "Not yet," I stammered, wiping my nose with the back of my hand. "But they will, by Monday morning. Mr. Henderson said I have maybe 48 hours before the liens hit the property records. I am going to lose it all. Gavin, grandmother's legacy, our home is all gone. I buried my face in my hands again, wailing. I was channeling every ounce of pain from the last 24 hours. The betrayal, the shock, the anger, and twisting it into this performance of a helpless, terrified woman. Gavin went silent. I could practically hear the gears in his head grinding. He was calculating. If the government seized the house, he got nothing. If the government seized the gems, he got nothing. He had to act. And he had to act now. "Joan, listen to me," he said, his voice dropping to that smooth, persuasive register he used when he wanted money. "We can fix this. We can protect the assets." I looked up, blinking through my tears. "How? There is no way." "We transfer them," he said, an urgent intensity in his eyes. "If the assets are not in your name when the feds come knocking, they cannot touch them. We need to get the penthouse and the gems out of your legal possession immediately." "But who can I trust?" I cried. "If I give them to a friend, they will say it is fraud. They will subpoena everyone." "Give them to me," Gavin said. He said it so simply. "The solution to all my problems." "But we are married," I said, playing the part of the confused victim. "They will just come after you." "Not if we are separated," Gavin said. He was improvising now, building the trap I had already dug for him. "We file a separation agreement. Today, we make it look like we are splitting up. I take the house and the valuables as a settlement. Legally, they become my sole property. Since I am not under investigation, the feds cannot touch my stuff. Once the investigation clears and Vanguard is proven innocent, we tear up the papers and put everything back." He cupped my face in his hands. "I am the only safe harbor you have. Joan, let me save us. Let me save your family's legacy." I stared at him. He was so convincing. If I did not know that he had a mistress waiting in the wings, if I did not know the gems in the safe were already glass, I might have believed him. He really was a talented con artist. "You would do that for me?" I whispered. "You would risk your own credit? Your own reputation?" "For you?" He smiled. That winning, boyish smile. "I would do anything. We are partners. Remember? Till death do us part." I let out a shuddering breath. Okay. Let us do it. But we have to hurry. It is Friday night. If we do not get the paperwork notarized and filed by tomorrow morning." "I know a guy," Gavin said quickly. "My lawyer, Larry. He works late. I will call him right now." He pulled out his phone and walked to the window, dialing furiously. I watched his back. He was not calling a high-powered attorney. He was calling Larry the Loophole Jenkins, a strip mall lawyer who handled DUIs and slip-and-fall cases. I knew about Larry. Elias had briefed me. Larry was cheap, fast, and notoriously sloppy. He was perfect. While Gavin was on the phone, I went to the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water. My hands shaking, this time from anticipation. I needed to introduce the document Elias had drafted without raising suspicion. Gavin came back into the kitchen, looking energized. "Larry is on his way. He says we can draft a marital settlement agreement right here. It is binding as soon as we sign it." "Good," I said, leaning against the counter. "I actually have something that might help. Vanguard's legal department gave me a flash drive a few months ago. It has emergency templates for asset protection. Boilerplate stuff for executives in high-risk litigation. Maybe we should use that? It is probably more watertight than whatever Larry can write up on a napkin." Gavin hesitated. He wanted control, but he also wanted speed, and he knew Vanguard hired the best legal minds in the country. "Let Larry look at it," he said. "If he gives the thumbs up, we use it." Larry arrived 40 minutes later. He was a short, sweating man in a rumpled suit that smelled of stale cigar smoke. He carried a briefcase that looked like it had survived a war. "Bad business, huh?" Larry said, wiping his forehead with a handkerchief as he sat down at my dining table. "Feds are nasty, but do not worry, Mrs. Mercer. We will get you liquidated and insulated before they can print the warrant." I sat across from him, clutching my glass of water. Thank you. Larry, I just want to make sure Gavin is protected. That is my priority. I slid the printed document Elias had prepared across the table. I had removed the cover page from Elias's firm and replaced it with a generic header. This is the Vanguard standard form, I said. Can you check if it works for us? Larry put on a pair of reading glasses that sat crookedly on his nose. He flipped through the pages, skimming. He was looking for the big words: transfer of title, sole ownership, relinquishment of claims. He saw what he wanted to see. The document explicitly stated that Joan Whitby was transferring 100% of the interest in the penthouse and the contents of the safe to Gavin Mercer. This is solid, Larry grunted, tapping a page. Very thorough. It gives him everything. The house, the jewelry, the furniture. You are walking away with nothing but your personal effects. From a legal standpoint, it is a total divestiture. The feds will hit a brick wall. He did not read Appendix C. He did not read the indemnity clause regarding the tax liabilities. He did not notice the specific language defining the gems as personal property accepted without appraisal. He saw a desperate woman handing over millions of dollars to his client, and he thought he had won the lottery. What about the debt? Gavin asked, leaning over Larry's shoulder. Does it say I take her debt? It says you take the asset subject to existing encumbrances, Larry said, waving his hand dismissively. That just means the mortgage, if there is one, but the equity is massive. You are fine, Gavin. You are more than fine. Gavin looked at me. He was trying to suppress a grin. Are you sure about this, Joan? Once you sign, it is mine. You cannot take it back. I know, I said, my voice barely a whisper. Just promise me you will keep the house safe, and the gems. Do not sell them. Gavin, please. They are all I have left of my grandmother. I promise, he said solemnly. I will just hold them. Safekeeping. When this blows over, they are yours again. He was lying. I knew he was lying. He was planning to sell the house the moment the ink was dry. Where do I sign? I asked. Larry pushed the pen toward me. It was a cheap plastic ballpoint, not the Montblanc I would use later for the final divorce papers, but it served the purpose. My hand trembled as I signed Joan Whitby on the dotted line. Gavin signed next. He pressed down hard, his signature bold and arrogant. He was signing his own financial death warrant, and he looked like he was signing an autograph. Done, Larry said, stamping the document with his notary seal. I will file the digital record with the county clerk first thing in the morning. By noon tomorrow, the property records will show Mr. Mercer as the owner. Thank you, Larry, Gavin said, shaking his hand vigorously. You are a lifesaver. I try, Larry smirked, packing up his briefcase. After Larry left, the atmosphere in the apartment shifted. Gavin was buzzing with energy. He poured himself another drink. He was the owner of a $2.5 million penthouse. He was a rich man. I sat on the sofa, staring at the floor. I think I'm going to be sick, I said. I need to go to the bathroom. I stood up, and as I did, I reached into my pocket. I pulled out the heavy brass key to the wall safe. Oh, I said, looking at it. I guess you should have this now, since it is yours. I placed the key on the coffee table. It made a heavy, dull clank against the marble. I am just going to wash my face, I said. I walked down the hall to the guest bathroom, leaving the door slightly ajar. I stood by the sink, gripping the porcelain, and waited. I heard Gavin's footsteps. He did not come to check on his crying wife. He went straight to the study. I crept out into the hallway, moving silently on my stockinged feet. From the shadows, I watched him. Gavin was standing in front of the open wall safe. He had the velvet tray out. He was running his hands over the fake stones, the glass sapphire, the synthetic ruby. Jackpot, I heard him whisper. He held the sapphire up to the light. He laughed, a low, guttural sound of triumph. He believed he had pulled off the heist of the century. He believed he had tricked me into giving him the real stones, unaware that he was holding worthless glass that he himself had put there. His relief was palpable. He must have been worried that I had discovered the switch during my audit panic, but seeing them there, seeing me hand over the key so willingly, confirmed his narrative. I was the fool, and he was the genius. He put the tray back and locked the safe. He kissed the steel door. "Don't worry, Joan," he said to the empty room. "I will take good care of them." He walked out of the study, heading back to the living room to finish his drink. I slipped back into the bathroom and flushed the toilet to announce my presence. I looked in the mirror. The desperate wife stared back at me, but behind the red-rimmed eyes, the predator was awake. He had signed. He had accepted the liability. He had accepted the fakes. The Trojan horse was inside the gates. The soldiers were ready to pour out. I splashed cold water on my face, washing away the fake tears. The easy part was over. Now came the waiting. 12 hours. Just 12 hours until the Phoenix Foundation triggered the debt call. Just 12 hours until the tax liens, which I had instructed Elias to unearth from the county archives, were reactivated under the new owner's name. I walked back out to the living room. Gavin was sitting on the sofa, texting, probably Kylie, probably telling her to pack her bags. "Feeling better?" he asked, not looking up. "A little," I said weakly. "I think I am just going to go to bed. I am exhausted." "You do that," Gavin said. "I am going to stay up for a bit. Handle some business emails." "Okay," I said. "Good night, Gavin." "Good night, Joan," he said. I walked to the bedroom, closed the door, and locked it. I did not sleep. I lay in the dark, listening to the silence of the apartment, waiting for the sun to rise on a brand new world. A world where I was free, and Gavin Mercer was about to learn that the heaviest thing in the world is a pen when you sign something you have not read. The elevator doors closed, sealing me inside the bronze-mirrored box, and for the first time in 5 years, I exhaled. It was a long, shuddering release of breath that seemed to empty my lungs of every lie I had been forced to swallow, but I did not have time to bask in the relief. The moment I stepped out into the lobby and into the biting Chicago wind, the clock started ticking. While I was hailing a cab to the secure safe house Elias had arranged, a nondescript serviced apartment on the other side of the loop, I knew exactly what was happening in the penthouse I had just vacated. I did not need the camera feed to see it, though I would check it later for the satisfaction. Gavin and Kylie were celebrating. They would be drinking the vintage champagne directly from the bottle. Kylie would be dancing on the coffee table, her heels digging into the Italian marble, spinning around with my grandmother's sapphire necklace swinging from her neck. Gavin would be making calls, bragging to his friends that he had finally closed the deal. They were high on the fumes of a victory that was already evaporating. They slept that night in my bed, on my sheets, dreaming of the millions they thought they had just stolen. The sun rose at 6 o'clock the next morning, a pale gray light filtering through the city smog. I was already awake. I sat in a booth at a 24-hour diner called the Nightingale, watching the steam rise from a black coffee. Elias Thorne slid into the seat across from me at exactly 7:30. He looked immaculate in a charcoal suit, contrasting sharply with the sticky vinyl of the booth. "It is done," Elias said, placing a tablet on the table. The Phoenix Foundation formally exercised its lien at midnight. The deed transfer Gavin signed yesterday, it was recorded at 8:01 this morning. But because of the pre-existing lien we activated, the title he holds is toxic. He owns the shell, Joan, and the shell is filled with debt. "And the bank?" I asked, sipping the bitter coffee. "They have been notified," Elias said, a shark-like grin spreading across his face. "The moment he tries to leverage the property, the system will flag the encumbrance. He is walking into a buzzsaw." At that exact moment, 5 miles away, Gavin Mercer was walking into the flagship branch of Sovereign Chase Bank. He was wearing his best suit, the navy bespoke one I had paid for. He carried a leather attaché case containing the settlement agreement and the deed transfer Larry had filed. He walked with the strut of a man who believes he is the smartest person in the room. He bypassed the teller line and went straight to the commercial lending department. "I need to speak with a loan officer," Gavin announced to the receptionist. "I am here to arrange a liquidity line against a prime real estate asset. $2 million, expedited." They ushered him into a glass-walled office. A young vice president named Mr. Henderson sat behind a desk. Gavin threw the papers down with a flourish. "I own the Penthouse at the Lakeshore Spire," Gavin said, leaning back in the chair. "I want to pull $2 million in equity out to fund a tech expansion. I have the deed right here. Sole owner, no mortgage." Mr. Henderson picked up the papers. He typed Gavin's social security number into his computer. He typed in the property address. Back at the diner. I checked my watch. "He is in the office now," I said. "He is asking for the money." Elias tapped the screen of his tablet. "And now?" In the bank office, Mr. Henderson frowned. He stopped typing. He squinted at the screen, then looked at Gavin, then back at the screen. The polite, customer service smile vanished. "Mr. Mercer," Henderson said, his voice cooling by 10 degrees. "There seems to be an issue with the title." "What issue?" Gavin laughed. A nervous, barking sound. "I signed the papers yesterday. My wife signed them. It is mine. Check the county clerk records." "I am looking at the county records," Henderson said. "And while it lists you as the title holder of record, there is a primary lien against the property held by the Phoenix Foundation Trust. The lien is for $3.2 million. Gavin froze. "That is impossible. The apartment is only worth 2.5. "Exactly," Henderson said, sliding the papers back across the desk. "The property is underwater. You do not have $2 million in equity. Mr. Mercer, you have negative $700,000 in equity. And according to this alert, the trust has initiated a call on the debt. Since you are now the title holder, you are liable for the repayment." "No," Gavin stammered, standing up. "No, that is a mistake. That is my wife's family trust. She owes that money, not me." "Not according to this transfer agreement," Henderson said, pointing to a paragraph Gavin had not read. "You accepted the property subject to all existing liens and encumbrances. You assumed the debt. Sir, we cannot lend you a dime. In fact, given your credit score and this new liability, the system is automatically freezing your personal accounts to prevent capital flight." "You cannot do that!" Gavin screamed, slamming his hand on the desk. Heads turned in the lobby. Security guards took a step forward. "This is my money. I am Gavin Mercer." "Please leave, sir," Henderson said, reaching for the silent alarm button. "Before I have you escorted out." Gavin grabbed his briefcase and ran. He stumbled out onto the street, his face pale, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cold. He fumbled for his phone and dialed Larry. "Larry?" he shrieked into the receiver. "What did you do? The bank says I owe $3 million. They say I bought a debt, not a house." "Calm down, Gavin," Larry's voice came through, sounding confused and possibly hungover. "What debt? The title search was clean 2 days ago." "The Phoenix Foundation," Gavin yelled. "They filed a lien. Joan set me up. You said the contract was solid." "I said the transfer was solid," Larry defended himself. "I did not run a forensic audit on her family trusts. You told me it was a friendly divorce." Gavin hung up. He stood on the corner of Michigan Avenue, the towering skyscrapers looking down on him like judgment stones. He was not rich. He was ruined, but I was not done with him yet. While Gavin was hyperventilating on the sidewalk, I opened my laptop in the diner. I had one more loose end to tie up. Kylie Vance. She was currently back at the Penthouse, packing her things. Gavin had promised her a shopping spree and a new Porsche once the bank loan cleared. I opened a secure email client and composed a message to Kylie's personal address, an address I had pulled from Gavin's iPad months ago. Subject: "You are backing the wrong horse." Body: Gavin did not get the loan. He just found out the Penthouse is owned by a trust, and he is liable for $3 million in debt. He is bankrupt. And the stones? The sapphire around your neck? Take it to a jeweler. It is glass. He sold the real ones months ago to pay his gambling debts. He is going to use you as a scapegoat. Get out while you can. I hit send. At the Penthouse. Kylie's phone pinged. She picked it up. Reading the message, her eyes widened. She looked at the door, expecting Gavin to burst in with bags of cash. Instead, silence. She looked at the sapphire necklace in the mirror. Glass? She whispered. Doubt is a powerful corrosive. Kylie was a survivor. She did not love Gavin. She loved the lifestyle he promised. If the lifestyle was a lie, she had no reason to stay, but she needed to be sure, and if the email was true, she needed cash to run. She grabbed her purse. She did not wait for Gavin. She took the necklace off, stuffed it into her bag, and ran for the elevator. She is moving, I said to Elias. Watching the GPS tracker, I had slipped into the lining of her purse, the same purse she had left on my table the night before. She is heading to Jewelers Row. She is going to try to fence it, Elias said. Predictable. I called Marcus already, I said. He knows she is coming. Marcus Gold was the owner of Gold Sons, a high-end pawn shop and estate jewelry buyer on Wabash Avenue. He was also a man who owed me a favor for authenticating a collection of stolen Faberge eggs for him 10 years ago. Kylie burst into Marcus's shop 20 minutes later. She was breathless, her eyes darting around the store. I need to sell this, she said, slamming the sapphire necklace onto the velvet counter. Cash, right now. I do not care about the appraisal. Just give me $50,000. Marcus, a heavy-set man with eyes like polished onyx, picked up the necklace. He did not need a loupe to recognize it. He had seen it on my neck at a dozen galas. He also knew the serial number was flagged in the police database as of 8 o'clock that morning, thanks to the report I had filed online. Beautiful piece, Marcus said slowly, turning it over in his hands. He looked at Kylie, at her cheap coat, her nervous shaking, the desperation rolling off her in waves. Family heirloom? Yes, Kylie lied. My grandmother left it to me. I just have an emergency. I need to liquidate it. I need to verify the setting, Marcus said. Give me 2 minutes in the back. Hurry up, Kylie snapped. Checking her phone, Gavin was calling her. She declined the call. Marcus walked into the back room. He did not check the setting. He pressed the silent panic button under the desk and then picked up the phone to call the precinct. We have a hit on the Whitby Sapphire, Marcus said quietly into the receiver. Suspect is a female, mid-20s. She is trying to fence it for cash. Keep the sirens off until you are at the door. Back in the showroom, Kylie was pacing. She felt the walls closing in. She checked her phone again. Another text from the anonymous number. Run. Kylie. She froze. She looked at the back door where Marcus had disappeared. The instinct that had kept her out of jail in Florida kicked in. Something was wrong. Hey, she shouted. Forget it. Just give it back. Marcus stepped out from the back, his face impassive. Just 1 more minute. Miss, the scales are calibrating. I said give it back. Kylie lunged for the counter. At that moment, the front door chimed. 2 uniformed officers stepped in, blocking the exit. Kylie Vance? One of them asked. Kylie spun around, her face draining of color. I did not steal it. He gave it to me. Gavin gave it to me. Ma'am, we have a report of a stolen sapphire necklace matching this description, the officer said, stepping forward. Please place your hands behind your back. No, Kylie screamed. It is his. He stole it from his wife. I am just holding it. You are trying to sell stolen property, ma'am, the officer said, snapping the handcuffs onto her wrists. That is trafficking. Back at the diner, Elias's phone buzzed. He looked at the message and smiled. They have her, he said. She is screaming Gavin's name to anyone who will listen. I took a slow sip of my coffee. It finally tasted sweet. Phase 1 is complete, I said. Now, we wait for Gavin to come home to a locked door and a frozen bank account. The rat is trapped in the maze, Elias, and we just blocked the exit. What do you want to do now? Elias asked. I want to go to the police station, I said, standing up and smoothing my coat. I think it is time for the grieving wife to identify her stolen property, and maybe drop a few hints about tax evasion while I'm there. I walked out of the diner. The wind was still cold, but I did not feel it. I felt nothing but the heat of the fire I had lit, burning brightly, consuming everything Gavin Mercer had ever built, if there is a sound sweeter than a symphony. It is the sound of a gold digger realizing the mine has collapsed while they are still inside it. At the exact moment Gavin stood shivering on Michigan Avenue, watching his financial future dissolve into the gray Chicago slush, Kylie Vance was experiencing her own special brand of atmospheric pressure. She was still at the counter of Gold & Sons, her hand hovering over the sapphire necklace, when the two officers approached her. They did not look like the kind of men who appreciated high fashion or the nuances of, "it was a gift." They looked like men who had paperwork to do and wanted to get it over with. "Kylie Vance," the older officer said, his voice flat. "You are under arrest for the possession and trafficking of stolen goods, valued in excess of $50,000. "I told you!" Kylie shrieked, her voice cracking as the cold steel of the handcuffs bit into her wrists. "I am the victim here. Gavin gave it to me. He told me it was his. Why aren't you arresting him?" "We will get to Mr. Mercer," the officer said, guiding her firmly toward the door. "But right now, you are the one holding the bag, or, in this case, the necklace." As they marched her out past the window, a small crowd had gathered. Passers-by held up their phones, filming the beautiful blonde woman being stuffed into the back of a squad car like a common shoplifter. Kylie tried to hide her face, but it was too late. The internet is faster than justice, and within 20 minutes, the hashtag #BaltDigger Gone Wrong would be trending locally. She was not going to the Four Seasons. She was going to Central Booking, where the amenities included a stainless steel toilet and a cheese sandwich. Meanwhile, Gavin was still staring at his phone on the street corner, his thumb hovering over Larry's name. He did not have to call. The phone rang in his hand, vibrating with the manic energy of a man who knows he's about to be sued for malpractice. "Gavin!" Larry's voice exploded through the speaker, so loud that Gavin had to pull the phone away from his ear. "Where are you? Tell me you did not try to leverage the deed yet." "I am at the bank," Gavin hissed, his panic turning into a cold, focused rage. "They laughed at me. Larry, they said the property is underwater. They said I owe $3 million to a trust fund. You said the contract was clean. You said I owned it." "I read the fine print," Larry screamed back, his voice pitching up an octave. "I finally sat down and read Appendix C, you idiot. You didn't tell me she had a family trust with a pre-existing lien. The contract you signed yesterday? It acknowledges the debt. You accepted sole residency in exchange for sole liability." "What does that mean?" Gavin shouted, ignoring the stares of a woman walking her poodle. "Speak English, Larry?" "It means you are not the owner," Larry yelled. "You are the tenant from hell. You have the right to live there for the duration of your natural life, provided you pay the maintenance fees, the property taxes, and the service on the debt to the Phoenix Foundation. You cannot sell it. You cannot mortgage it. You can only pay for it. You just signed a lease that cost you $40,000 a month, and you can never break it." Gavin felt the blood drain from his face. He staggered back against the brick wall of the bank. $40,000 a month? "And it gets worse," Larry continued, sounding like he was hyperventilating. "The clause about the personal property, the gems. You signed a waiver acknowledging receipt of the items as is, and waived your right to any future appraisal or claim of fraud. It says right here, the transferee accepts the collection in its current state and acknowledges that no representations of value have been made by the transferor. Gavin, if those rocks are not real, you have no legal recourse. You legally agreed that whatever is in that safe is what you deserve." Gavin hung up. He dropped the phone. It hit the pavement, cracking the screen, a fitting metaphor for his life. He stood there for a full minute, his brain short-circuiting. The house was a trap. The debt was a noose, but the gems. The gems had to be real. They were the fail-safe. Joan loved those stones. She worshipped them. There was no way she would have swapped them out. She was too sentimental. That must be the only thing she didn't touch. He flagged down a taxi, throwing himself into the back seat. "Lakeshore Drive," he barked. "And drive like you are escaping a fire." The ride took 15 minutes. Gavin spent every second of it sweating through his bespoke suit. He ran through the lobby, ignoring the doorman who tried to hand him an envelope, doubtless the official notice of the deed transfer. He slammed into the elevator, punching the button for the penthouse. He burst into the apartment. It was quiet. The morning sun flooded the living room, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. It looked peaceful. It looked rich. But now, to Gavin, it looked like a prison cell with a very expensive view. He ran to the study. He unlocked the safe with trembling fingers. The velvet tray was there. The stones glittered in the dark metal box. Blue, red, green. They looked heavy. They looked expensive. He grabbed the entire tray, dumping the stones into a gym bag. He did not care about the setting or the boxes. He just needed the rocks. He ran back out, not even bothering to close the safe. 30 minutes later, he was sitting in the office of Isaac Stern, a diamond merchant on Jewelers Row, who had done some off-the-book deals for Gavin in the past. Isaac was a man of few words and even fewer scruples. But he knew his stones. Isaac adjusted his loupe, picking up the massive cashmere sapphire with a pair of tweezers. He looked at it for 5 seconds. He put it down. He picked up the ruby. 3 seconds. He put it down. He took the loupe out of his eye and looked at Gavin with a mixture of pity and amusement. "Gavin," Isaac said, his voice dry, "is this a joke? Are you pranking me?" "Just tell me what they are worth," Gavin said, his voice trembling. "I need quick cash. Isaac, I will take 70% of market value. Just give me a number." "I can give you a number," Isaac said, leaning back in his chair. $500. For the lot." The silence in the room was absolute. Gavin stared at him, his mouth opening and closing like a fish on a dock. "500,000? Gavin whispered. $500, Isaac corrected him. "Maybe 600 if I can sell the synthetic ruby to a costume designer. Gavin, this is glass, high-end glass, flame fusion synthetics, maybe some hydrothermal quartz, but it is costume jewelry. You can buy this stuff on the internet for $50 a carat." "But the weight," Gavin stammered. "They feel real. They are weighted," Isaac shrugged. "Lead glass, old trick. Whoever did this knew what they were doing. They wanted to fool a novice, but they wouldn't fool a pawn shop, let alone a dealer." Gavin stood up. His legs felt like jelly. "She knew," he whispered. "She knew the whole time." He grabbed the bag of worthless glass and stumbled out of the office. He walked blindly down the street, the noise of the city fading into a dull roar. He had nothing. No house, no money, no mistress, no exit strategy. And he had just signed a document legally stating that he was happy with his bag of glass. A primal, incoherent rage began to bubble up in his chest. It was not the guilt of a man who had done wrong. It was the fury of a narcissist who had been outsmarted. He pulled out his phone again. He dialed Joan. It went straight to voicemail. He dialed again. Voicemail. Again. He ran back to the car. He needed to get back to the penthouse. He needed to break something. He needed to burn it down. If he couldn't have it, nobody could. He arrived back at the building, storming past the doorman. He rode the elevator up, his breath coming in short, angry gasps. He unlocked the door and threw it open. "Joan!" he screamed, his voice echoing off the marble walls. "Joan, answer me. You think you're smart? You think you can do this to me?" The apartment was empty, but it didn't feel empty. It felt hostile. He walked into the center of the living room, spinning around, looking for a camera, looking for anything to destroy. He picked up a vase, a Ming vase, or at least he thought it was, and smashed it against the floor. "Answer me!" he roared at the ceiling. And then, the apartment answered, but not with a voice. The lights in the living room flickered once, twice, and then turned a deep, angry red. The smart lighting system, which Joan had installed and controlled from her phone, had entered security mode. Then came the cold. A blast of freezing air hit him from the vents. The HVAC system roared to life, not on a gentle cycle, but at maximum velocity. The thermostat on the wall lit up, the numbers plummeting, 70 degrees, 60, 50. I was sitting in the police station waiting room, watching the telemetry on my phone. I swiped my finger across the screen, setting the target temperature to 10 degrees Celsius, 50 degrees Fahrenheit. I tapped the icon labeled Perimeter Lockdown. Back in the penthouse, the heavy electronic bolts on the front door slammed home with a sound like a gunshot. The steel shutters on the windows, designed for storm protection, began to roll down, blocking out the sun, sealing the apartment in a red-lit tomb. Gavin ran to the door. He grabbed the handle. It was locked. He pounded on it. "Open! Open the damn door!" Then, the sound started. The fire alarm. But not just the beep. It was the voice evacuation system. "Emergency. Evacuate immediately. Emergency. Evacuate immediately." It was a recorded voice, blaring at 120 decibels. It was designed to wake the dead. Now, it was designed to break the living. Gavin covered his ears, screaming, but he couldn't hear himself. He ran to the kitchen panel to try and override the system. The screen was black, displaying only a single, glowing emoji, a winking face. He retreated to the sofa, curling into a ball as the freezing wind blasted him and the siren bored into his skull. He was trapped in the luxury cage he had fought so hard to steal. He was freezing in his Italian suit. He was clutching a bag of glass stones. And somewhere in the distance, he could hear the faint wail of real sirens approaching. Not for the fire, but for him, because while he was smashing the vase, the glass break sensors I had installed had silently alerted the police to a violent break-in in progress by an unauthorized individual. The illusion wasn't just broken, it was being dismantled, piece by piece, while he sat in the center of the wreckage, shivering, deafened, and utterly, completely alone. The phone on the table in front of me vibrated with the persistence of a dying insect. It was Gavin. He had called 42 times in the last 20 minutes. I watched the screen light up, his name flashing against a picture I had taken 3 years ago on a beach in Maui, a picture where he looked tan, happy, and deceptively loving. I did not answer. The time for conversation had ended the moment he signed that contract. Now, it was time for the closing argument. I sat in the sterile, fluorescent-lit waiting area of the 1st District Police Station. Elias sat beside me, his posture relaxed, scrolling through a tablet. To anyone passing by, we looked like two professionals waiting for a meeting. In reality, we were executioners waiting for the guillotine blade to drop. "He is still calling," I said, my voice flat. "He is panicked," Elias replied without looking up. "He is trapped in a freezing apartment with an alarm blaring at 100 decibels. He thinks you are his savior. He thinks if he can just get you on the phone, he can charm or bully his way out of this." "I should send him a lifeline," I said. Elias glanced at me, eyebrows raised. "Mercy, Joan, that is not like you." "Not mercy," I corrected him, a cold smile touching my lips. "Clarity." I picked up my phone. I did not answer the call. Instead, I opened our message thread and pasted a link. It was a private link to a video file hosted on a secure server. I added a single line of text. "Watch this before the battery dies." I hit send. Back in the penthouse, huddled in the corner of the sofa under a throw blanket that was doing nothing to block the biting wind from the vents. Gavin saw the message. His fingers were numb as he tapped the link. The blaring alarm made it hard to hear, so he held the phone pressed tight against his ear. The video on his screen was grainy, night vision footage from the camera I had hidden in the smoke detector above the kitchen island. The timestamp was from 3 weeks ago. It showed Gavin pacing the kitchen, phone in hand. He was talking to someone named Victor. "I told you. I have the collateral." Gavin's voice hissed through the speaker, distorted but undeniable. "The penthouse, the gems, it is all coming to me. I just need more time on the vig." There was a pause as the person on the other end spoke. Then Gavin said the words that would seal his coffin. "Look, I already signed the promissory note. Yeah, I signed her name, Joan Whitby. I have her signature down perfect. You can check it against the deed. It is a valid lien. Just do not approach her, okay? If she finds out, I forged her signature to secure a $200,000 loan from your organization. The deal blows up. Just wait until the divorce is final." Gavin dropped the phone. It clattered onto the freezing marble floor. He stared at the black screen. He had forgotten about that conversation. He had been drunk, desperate to pay off a gambling debt before his knees got broken. He had forged my signature on a loan document with an illegal syndicate, using my property as collateral without my consent. That was not just a marital dispute. That was identity theft. That was bank fraud. That was a felony that carried a mandatory prison sentence. And I had just sent him the proof that I had it. And more importantly, that the police would have it. "He has seen it," I said, watching the read receipt appear on my phone. "Good timing." Elias checked his watch. "Because the cavalry has arrived." On the monitor of my laptop, which was still linked to the Penthouse security feed, I saw the front door shutter. The police had arrived in response to the violent break-in alarm I had triggered. They did not have the code, and the electronic locks were engaged. They used a battering ram. The door splintered open with a crash that was audible even over the siren. 4 officers in tactical gear swept into the room, guns drawn, flashlights cutting through the red emergency lighting. "Police! Hands in the air!" they screamed. Gavin scrambled up from the sofa, his hands shaking as he raised them. Tears were streaming down his face, freezing on his cheeks. He looked like a man who had been shipwrecked. "Thank God!" he sobbed. "Help me. My wife's house is malfunctioning. I am the owner. I am the owner." The lead officer lowered his weapon slightly, but he did not holster it. He stepped forward, looking at the shivering man in the expensive, ruined suit. "Are you Gavin Mercer?" "Yes, yes," Gavin cried, stepping forward. "Please, just turn off the alarm. It is freezing in here." The officer reached for his belt, but he did not reach for a thermostat control. He reached for his handcuffs. "Gavin Mercer," the officer said, his voice cutting through the noise. "You are under arrest for grand larceny, fraud, and identity theft. Turn around and place your hands behind your back." "What?" Gavin shrieked. "No, I am the victim. She locked me in." "We have a warrant, sir," the officer said, spinning Gavin around and slamming him against the wall. The cold steel clicked around his wrists. "And we have a statement from your accomplice." Gavin froze. "Accomplice?" "Ms. Kylie Vance," the officer said, dragging him toward the door. "She has been very chatty down at the precinct." The scene shifted back to the station. I was sitting in the observation room with Elias, looking through the one-way glass into interrogation room B. Kylie Vance sat at the metal table. The arrogance was gone. The influencer pout was gone. She was a 24-year-old girl who was terrified of going to prison for fencing stolen goods. Her mascara was running, and she was talking fast, desperate to trade information for leniency. "He made me do it," Kylie wept, clutching a paper cup of water. "He told me the necklace was his. He said his wife didn't care about it. He said he was going to be rich." "Tell us about the car," the detective said. Leaning forward, my breath hitched. This was the part I had only suspected, the part that turned my blood to ice. "He was talking about it last week," Kylie stammered. "He said if Joan didn't sign the papers soon, he would have to take drastic measures. He looked up brake lines. He looked up how to loosen them so it looks like wear and tear. He said if she had an accident, he would inherit everything automatically. No divorce needed." I closed my eyes. A single tear escaped. Hot and angry. I had known Gavin was a thief. I had known he was a liar. But hearing that he had contemplated killing me, that he had actively researched how to murder me to get his hands on my money, removed the last shred of guilt I might have felt. "We have enough," Elias said softly, placing a hand on my shoulder. "That is conspiracy to commit murder." With her testimony and his browser history, which we also preserved, he is never getting out. Back in the hallway, the reality of Gavin's situation was compounding. As he was being processed, stripped of his belt and shoelaces, he was allowed his one phone call. He called Larry. "Larry, you have to get down here," Gavin pleaded into the receiver, his voice cracking. "They are charging me with everything. Conspiracy, fraud. You need to bail me out." "Gavin," Larry's voice was cold. "I just got off the phone with the bank. Your accounts are frozen. You have a negative net worth of $3 million thanks to that contract I warned you about. Well, the one I read too late. And I heard about the loan sharks." "What loan sharks?" Gavin whispered. "Word travels fast," Larry said. "Victor's crew knows you are in custody. They know you don't have the money, and they know you forged their paperwork. I am a strip mall lawyer. Gavin, not a death wish. I don't represent clients who are targets for the mob, and I definitely don't represent clients who can't pay my retainer." "Larry, please," Gavin begged. "I have nothing." "Exactly," Larry said. "Good luck." "Gavin." The line went dead. Gavin stared at the receiver. He was alone. His lawyer had abandoned him. His mistress had betrayed him. His wife had outsmarted him. And outside the walls of the jail, the sharks, both legal and criminal, were circling. I waited until he was placed in a holding cell before I made my move. I wanted him to have a moment to sit in the silence, to let the weight of his new reality settle on his shoulders. I walked down the corridor, my heels clicking rhythmically on the linoleum. Elias walked beside me, carrying a thick manila envelope. We stopped in front of the holding cell. Gavin was sitting on the metal bench, his head in his hands. He looked up when he heard us. His eyes were red, rimmed with dark circles. For a moment, a flicker of hope crossed his face. "Joan," he croaked, scrambling to the bars. "Joan, please, you have to stop this. Tell them it was a misunderstanding. I am your husband. We can work this out. I will sign whatever you want." I looked at him. I looked at the man who had charmed me at a gala, who had held my hand at my grandmother's funeral, and who had planned to cut the brake lines of my car. "You already signed what I wanted." "Gavin," I said, my voice calm and steady. "You signed the transfer. You signed the confession." "I am sorry," he wept, gripping the bars. "I got greedy. I was weak. But you can't leave me here. The guys, the people I owe money to, they will kill me if I go into general pop. Joan, please. I am not here to bail you out." "Gavin," I said. I nodded to Elias. He stepped forward and slid the manila envelope through the gap in the bars. It landed on the floor with a heavy thud. "What is this?" Gavin asked, staring at it. "That," I said, "is the final piece of the puzzle. You see, while you were busy spending money you didn't have, you were also neglecting to pay taxes on the income you did hide. That envelope contains the records of the shell companies you set up to launder the money you stole from our joint accounts." Gavin recoiled, as if the envelope were a snake. "I am handing a copy of that to the IRS Criminal Investigation Division on my way out," I continued. "Al Capone went down for tax evasion. Gavin, it is the one thing the government never forgives. This ensures that even if you somehow wiggle out of the fraud charges, even if the conspiracy charge doesn't stick, the feds will bury you. You are going to prison for a very, very long time." "Why?" Gavin whispered, sliding down to the floor, defeated. "Why go this far? You had the house. You had the gems. Why destroy me?" I leaned in close to the bars, so close I could smell the fear and the stale sweat on him. "Because you didn't just want my money. Gavin," I said, my voice dropping to a whisper that was colder than the air in the penthouse. "You wanted to erase me. You wanted to take my history, my family, my safety, and my life, and trade them for a Porsche and a condo. You made me sign away my past, so I signed away your future. I stood up straight, adjusting my coat. Goodbye, Gavin. I hope the heating in here is better than at home. I turned and walked away. Behind me, Gavin began to scream. He screamed my name. He screamed curses. He screamed for a lawyer. But as I pushed through the heavy doors and out into the afternoon sun, his voice faded into background noise, no more significant than the honking of a taxi or the wind blowing off the lake. I took a deep breath. The air tasted of exhaust and winter, but to me, it smelled like freedom. Are you okay? Elias asked, watching me closely. I am out $2.5 million on the Penthouse equity, I said, doing the math in my head. And the legal fees are going to be substantial. And? Elias asked. And it was worth every penny, I said. Now, let us go to the IRS office. I don't want to be late. Time has a way of bleaching the stains out of fabric, but it takes a little more effort to scrub the stain of a toxic marriage out of a life. It took 6 months. 6 months of depositions, hearings, and signatures. 6 months of untangling the financial knots Gavin had tied around my ankles. But as I stood on the balcony of the Penthouse, looking out at the glittering expanse of Lake Michigan, I finally felt clean. The legal system, for once, had worked exactly as designed. The evidence was overwhelming. The video of the theft, the forged loan documents, the testimony of a scorned mistress. It was an avalanche that buried Gavin Mercer. The trial had been short. Gavin had tried to play the charm card one last time, wearing a cheap suit provided by a public defender because his assets were frozen, and Larry had long since blocked his number. But juries do not like men who steal from their wives, and they especially do not like men who plot to cut brake lines. The judge was a woman with eyes like steel traps. She sentenced him to 8 years in a federal penitentiary for wire fraud, grand larceny, and identity theft. There was no parole eligibility for the first 5 years. I was there when the gavel came down. Gavin looked back at me, his face pale and hollow, searching for some hint of the woman who used to forgive him for everything. All he found was a stranger who checked her watch and walked out before the bailiff even touched his arm. As for Kylie, the system was slightly more lenient. But society was not. She received 3 years of probation in exchange for her testimony against Gavin, but her career as an influencer was dead. The internet is a cruel historian. The hashtag regarding her arrest had followed her home to Florida. The last report from my private investigator noted that she was working the drive-through window at a fast food joint in her hometown, wearing a polyester visor and serving fries to people who whispered about her when she turned her back. She had wanted to be famous. Now, she was infamous. With the criminal chapter closed, the civil reclamation began. The Phoenix Foundation had formally foreclosed on the Penthouse to satisfy the debt Gavin had unknowingly assumed. Once the title was cleared and stripped of Gavin's name, the trust transferred it back to my control. I walked into the apartment on a Tuesday morning in late August. It was silent. The red emergency lights were gone, replaced by the soft, natural sunlight I had always loved, but the air still felt heavy. It smelled of Gavin's scotch and the lingering perfume of betrayal. I did not move back in. Instead, I hired a crew of industrial cleaners. I told them to strip it. Everything? The foreman had asked, looking at the expensive Italian leather sofas and the silk drapes. Everything, I had replied. If he touched it, I do not want it. Burn it. Donate it. I do not care. Just get it out. They worked for a week. They scrubbed the marble until it shone like new skin. They repainted the walls a crisp, gallery white, covering the masculine grays Gavin had insisted on. By the time they were finished, the Penthouse was no longer a home. It was a blank canvas, and that was exactly what I needed for tonight. The elevator chimed, announcing the arrival of the first guests. I smoothed the skirt of my emerald green dress, a color chosen deliberately to clash with the blue sapphire necklace I was wearing. The real one. Tonight was the Phoenix Gala. I had invited the elite of Chicago, the collectors, the critics, the society matrons who had whispered about my divorce, to a private exhibition. The apartment was filled with display cases. Inside them sat the true Whitby collection, the rough diamonds, the rubies, the emeralds. They were not hidden in a safe anymore. They were out in the open, bathed in halogen light, unapologetic and real. "Joan, darling," Elias Thorne walked in. Holding a glass of champagne, he looked triumphant. "The turnout is incredible. Everyone is dying to see the woman who took down the crypto king." "Let them look," I said, taking a flute from a passing waiter. "Curiosity is good for business." The room filled up quickly. The hum of conversation grew loud. People admired the view. They complimented the renovation. They told me how brave I was for keeping the apartment, for reclaiming my space. "It is so empowering," a woman named Beatrice gushed, clutching my arm. "To live here again. To sleep in the bedroom where you won. It is poetic justice." "Joan," I smiled politely. "It is certainly poetic. Beatrice?" At 8 o'clock. I tapped a spoon against my glass. The room went silent. "Thank you all for coming," I said, my voice projecting clearly across the space. "You are here to celebrate the recovery of the Whitby collection. These stones represent my past. They represent my family. And for a while, I almost lost them because I forgot their value." I paused. Looking around the room, I saw admiration in their eyes. They thought they knew the ending of the story. They thought the happy ending was the woman back in her castle. "Many of you have asked if I am happy to be back home," I continued. "You have praised the renovation. You have said this penthouse is a symbol of my victory." I took a deep breath. "But a victory is not about going back to where you started. It is about going somewhere new. I cannot live in this apartment. Every corner of this place holds a memory of a lie. I cannot drink coffee in a kitchen where my murder was planned. I cannot sleep in a room that was used as a bargaining chip." A ripple of confused whispers went through the crowd. "So," I announced, gesturing to the auctioneer standing quietly in the corner, "tonight is not just an exhibition, it is an auction. And the first item on the block is not a gemstone. It is this penthouse." Gasps echoed off the walls. Elias grinned, raising his glass to me. He knew. "I am selling it," I said firmly. "Tonight, lock, stock, and barrel, and I am pledging 100% of the proceeds, an estimated $3 million, to launch the Whitby Initiative." I stepped forward, my voice gaining strength. "The Whitby Initiative will be a legal defense fund and financial literacy program for women who have been victims of financial abuse and spousal fraud. We will provide the lawyers, the forensic accountants, and the safety nets that I was lucky enough to afford to women who cannot." Applause started slowly, then swelled into a roar. "And," I added, silencing them for one last point, "there is one more asset. During the divorce proceedings, my lawyers discovered that Gavin actually had one viable idea, a specific blockchain coding sequence for tracking supply chains. He never developed it because he was too lazy, but he owned the patent. As part of my settlement for his unpaid debts, the court awarded me full ownership of his intellectual property." I smiled, a sharp, dangerous smile. "I sold that patent to a logistics firm in Seattle yesterday for $400,000. Every penny of Gavin's genius is now going to fund the very women he tried to exploit. I think he would appreciate the irony. Eventually." The applause was deafening this time. I had turned the wreckage of my marriage into a fortress for others. I had not just survived, I had evolved. The next morning, the apartment was empty again. The sold sign was already being printed for the lobby. I stood on the curb with a single carry-on bag. The wind was whipping off the lake, but it felt different now. It was not a biting cold. It was a fresh, bracing breeze. A vintage Mercedes convertible pulled up to the curb. It was silver, sleek, and timeless. The driver leaned over and popped the passenger door open. It was not a new lover. I was done with romance for a while. I needed something more reliable than passion. The driver was Julian, a venture capitalist I had met through Elias. We were partners in the new foundation. He was gay, happily married to a doctor, and possessed a ruthless financial mind that matched my own. "Ready to go, partner?" Julian asked, adjusting his sunglasses. "We have a meeting in New York at noon. The donors are waiting." "I am ready," I said. I tossed my bag into the back seat and slid into the leather passenger seat. The engine purred to life, a deep, throaty growl of German engineering. As we pulled away from the curb, merging into the traffic of Lakeshore Drive, I looked up at the spire one last time. I saw the penthouse windows reflecting the morning sun. It looked small from down here. It looked like just another box in the sky. I adjusted the side mirror. I saw the building receding behind us, getting smaller and smaller until it disappeared into the skyline of the city. I felt a profound sense of lightness. I had no mortgage. I had no husband. I had no secrets. I had my name, my reputation, and a mission. I turned forward, letting the wind catch my hair. He wanted to rob me. He wanted to break me. He thought that by applying pressure, he could crush me into dust. "He wanted to steal my shine," I said aloud. The words lost to the wind, but clear in my heart. But he forgot one thing. Diamonds only shine brightest under pressure, and I am that diamond. Julian looked over and smiled. "Did you say something?" "No," I said, putting on my sunglasses. "Just drive." Thank you so much for listening to this story. It has been a journey of betrayal, justice, and ultimate redemption, and I hope you felt every twist and turn along with Joan. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. Are you listening from your car, your kitchen, or maybe winding down for bed? Please leave a comment below and let me know your location and what you thought of Gavin's punishment. Did he get what he deserved? If you enjoyed this story, please make sure to subscribe to the channel Sweet Rose Drama. Hit that like button to support the work. And if you really want to help this story reach more people, please press the hype button. Your support means the world to us and helps us bring more dramatic, emotional stories to life. Thank you, and see you in the next one.